May we begin, dear ladies and gentlemen? It's a pleasure to have you. Per usual, we will skip the introductory remarks and we'll go directly into a debate, and we'll try to make it as sharp as possible and to make the most that we can from the 43 minutes that we have. So let me ask you a provocative question. What is this Russian-Ukrainian war really about? Can we look at it as a spiritual warfare between, let's say, two interpretations of Christianity? Because it is two Christian nations, both Moscow and Ukraine lie on the territory of Europe, so you could say that they're also geographically European capitals, both. But one wants to go back to Europe, even though I'm not aware that you want to move geographically, but spiritually, perhaps, if I can use that word. Is it a different interpretation of Christianity? Because to me, Western Christianity is the power of powerless, whereas the Eastern, if I may use this very generic and broad term, is the power of the powerful. And I would really like to know to what degree has this conflict been perhaps bubbling in the Christian debates? Let's begin with that. To what degree is this a spiritual war? What does Russia want from Ukraine?
Шановний модератор та учасники цієї важливої панельної дискусії, перш за все я хочу подякувати і організаторам за те, що в цілому форум 2000, що ви включили питання використання релігійної риторики, релігійних інститутів та авторитету, який вони мають як складової частини гібридної агресії Росії проти України, проти Європи та загалом проти принципів свободи і гідності. На мою думку, багато хто навіть із спеціалістів у відповідних інтелектуальних і політичних сферах поки що сильно недооцінюють релігійний, але краще сказати, псевдорелігійний фактор як фундамент для виправдання і просування російської агресії. З одного боку, можна сказати з повним переконанням, що вторгнення Росії в Україну в жодному разі не є релігійним конфліктом. Хоча держава-агресор послідовно намагається представити його і для внутрішньої, і для зовнішньої аудиторії саме як релігійний конфлікт.
Dear moderator and participants of this important panel discussion, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the Forum 2000 as well for placing on the agenda the issue of how religious rhetoric, religious institutions and the authority they carry are being used as a component of Russia's hybrid aggression against Ukraine, against Europe, and more broadly, against the principles of freedom and human dignity. In my view, many, even among specialists in the relevant intellectual and political fields, still greatly underestimate the religious, or better said, pseudo-religious factor as a foundation for justifying and advancing Russian aggression. On the one hand, I can say with full conviction, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is in no way a religious conflict. Also, the aggressor state consistently tries to present it, both to domestic and foreign audience, precisely as a religious conflict. For the domestic audience, it employs the ideology of the Ruski Mir and explains the war against Ukraine as a supposed sacred duty to liberate Holy Rus from the influence of a heretical and godless West.
But that very much sounds like a religious claim.
The medieval fails religious political concept that Moscow is allegedly the third Rome, that Russia is the last politically protected space of true Christianity, has been transformed under the new conditions of Kremlin dictatorship into the ideology of the Ruski Mir. This ideology uses religious rhetoric and institution of the Moscow Patriarchate as well as other religious centers in Russia, Muslim, Protestant, and Jewish, to justify an aggressive near-imperial policy. the head of the Moscow Patriarchate, Gundyaev, directly calls the war against Ukraine a holy war, borrowing this very concept at once from political Islamism and from Soviet ideology. For foreign audience, a different fails concept is used. In the Euro-Atlantic space, Russian propaganda promotes the narrative of this war as a purportedly forced defense of traditional values against the aggressive advance of godless liberalism. Russia presents itself not as an aggressor, but as a fake defender of traditional Christianity. The Russian Patriarchate poses not as an instrument of hybrid warfare, which it in fact is, nor as a collaborator of the state's suppression of religion freedom in Russia itself and in the territories of it occupies, but rather as a supposed victim of persecution that the Kremlin is compelled to protect. Thus, also Russia's war against Ukraine and Europe has no genuine religious character. Religious rhetoric and the use of religious organizations play a key role within the ideology of the Ruski Mir. As a state, Russia has never in all its history since their creation in the 14th century had religious freedom. The state has always used and continues to use the institution of the church as one of the tools of its political agenda. Therefore, in my opinion, it is correct to describe the current war not as a religious one, but as a war that systematically uses religion to build a foundation for aggression, employs religious motivation in the form of a holy war to sustain that aggression, and uses religious institutions to spread and enrich a trench war propaganda. Ukraine has genuine religious freedom. For almost 30 years, the Ukrainian Council of Churches and religious organizations has been operating successfully in Ukraine, uniting all the main confessions and religious communities of our country, Christians of all major traditions, Jews and Muslims. And this council, on behalf of the united religious community of Ukraine, consistently and unanimously affirms that even in wartime, our state maintains religious freedom, the kind of freedom that does not exist in Russia, and especially not in the territories temporarily occupied by it. Throughout all the years of Russian aggression, starting with the occupation of Crimea in 2014, our Council has consistently declared that Russia's war against Ukraine has no and cannot have any religious justification. Likewise, there is no and cannot be any justification for the Kremlin's use of religious organizations as instruments of hybrid warfare. To sum up, I can say that also in its essence, Russia's war against Ukraine is not religious. Its cause lies not in religion itself, but in the neo-imperial ideology of the Ruski Mir. At the same time, Russia uses religious rhetoric and religious institutions to justify the war and to frame it as a holy war. As for the fundamental difference between how we in Ukraine see Orthodox Christianity and how it is seen in Russia, this can already be partly understood from what has been said. For us, Orthodox Christianity has value as a path of truth, a way of life and a faith that helps a person live rightly and morally pure here on earth, and that guides the soul toward salvation and the attainment of the kingdom of heaven in eternity. For Russia, Orthodox faith and the Church have primarily become instruments whose purpose is to serve the expansion of the Russian state influence. For us, God is in the first place. For the adherents of the Ruski Mir ideology, it is the Russian state and the power that embodies it comes first. For us, a patriotic stance is the embodiment of Christ's commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. That's why we, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, understand ourselves and wish to be seen as a one large family of the faithful, an integral part of society. To some extent, we can call ourselves a people's church. By contrast, the Moscow Patriarchate is, in the fullest sense, a state church in the worst medieval and imperial tradition. As an institution, it doesn't serve the people. It serves the state and its rulers. It uses the authority of religion to subordinate the population to the politicians who now sit in the Kremlin. So, to put it briefly, our church fulfills the command to render unto God that is God's, and unto Caesar what is Caesar's. For the Moscow Patriarchate, however, renders everything, both what is God's and what is Caesar's, to the Kremlin dictator and serves him above all.
Okay. Is that all?
Thank you very much for the attention.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
It's a
That's
finish.
very comprehensive. But I'm sorry, it still sounds like a religious war. I mean, it quacks like a dog, walks like a dog. It has major religious misunderstanding in the relationship towards the state, but maybe that's just me. Kate, what do you come in?
Your Beatitude, Metropolitan, dear guests, friends, colleagues, it's truly a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and honestly, I think this is amazing that this time we have an even bigger room at Forum 2000 to talk about these extremely important topics, and hopefully we will keep talking about the role of religion and democracy, because I think because we have a very limited time, I'm not going to talk about why I'm sitting here, but I have been a civic and democracy activist, and for past 12 years I have been working with religious leaders to engage them in Georgia's European integration, because it's a very clear signal that religion is not just belief or what people do on Sundays. It is a part of the daily lives. More than 84% of Georgians are Orthodox. And our patriarch, who is 92 years old, his approval rate is more than 95% in the country. So it's basically a dream come true for any politician, and none of their dreams have come true, actually. So nobody really compares to his level of trust. So why I'm saying that, with all the different data that we have, it's clear that church on our daily lives has a way bigger impact on Georgians, not only on religious issues, but on all the other issues. Why I'm saying that? Because we have seen extremely important role of the church is playing in Georgia's even foreign policy. We have been lucky to see Georgian Orthodox Church making public statements supporting Georgia's European path as a choice of Georgian people. And I'll be very direct and honest, I don't think that would be 80% of Georgians supporting Georgia's European integration today if there would be no church behind this support.
So how come what happened in Georgia happened?
That's a very good question. I don't think anybody has answer to that, but actually there is an answer. And I think the war in Ukraine that is happening, this unbelievable war that has happened, has shown to some and has created a huge fear in Georgia, because you know this, that Georgia has been first in this unfortunate, not only 2008, actually Georgia has lost its independence in 1918, and that's when Russians came in, first thing that they did was canceling independence of our church and trying to destroy Georgian churches, trying to destroy Georgian heritage, trying to recreate our history from religious perspective as well.
How could they do that with such huge public support for the churches?
Well, I think that's how public support has become for church, because Georgian church, I think that's why it's extremely important to understand the differences, because I think we all come from different cultures, and I know for many of you this might sound as a surprising, but in Georgian church has become a part of Georgian identity and part of the fight. Because when I mentioned 1918, that actually the Georgian patriarch was arrested. He was the one actually in the front lines fighting for keeping Georgia's independency. So we have several saints in our church who have been actually tortured by Russia, and even though we are the same, we share the same religion, as you have mentioned, unfortunately, this will not be news, that the Russian state has been using the church and has been using the religion as a tool.
And the Russians allowed that, the Russian church authorities allowed that to happen?
Which is very unfortunate, and I'm sure I, as a Georgian Christian Orthodox, of course this is very painful, and I fully agree with his beatitude when he mentioned, I think it's extremely painful to say this is a religious war. I don't think this is religious war, because we believe in same, and we share the same values. I think it's extremely important and sad to see Russian state using religion as a tool, and we have seen that through the centuries. And if I may add a few words on, I think for Kremlin, for many years, it has been very clear that they have a very clear strategy involving religion. They have a vision on institutionalized way how to work with church and churches, and even on personal level, how to reach out to different bishops and priests.
So when
unfortunately,
did this
we have failed in that, and I'll finish and I'll let you.
Right.
Because I think with West, in my 13 years of working in this area, it has been extremely hard to convince West to work with church, to engage them. And I again want to thank representatives today, because I think it's extremely important when we talk about democracy. You cannot have a progress without widening our coalitions. And we need religious leaders next to us, because again, I'll be very honest, and I think it's fair to say, when you have such a trusted institutions in our countries, like you have church in Ukraine, church in Georgia, you will need their support to make democracy cool again, and we need the stronger support, and we need their engagement. So I think it works both ways, and I think we need to be also smart. I'm not saying that we need to be evil, of course not, like Kremlin has been using it, but we need to understand the role of church and role of religious leaders, have them at our table, answer their questions, and actually be also open from ourselves to hear what questions they have, how we can make the progress together.
So did this begin in Georgia and in Ukraine? Before I give the word to you, so in war terminology we call this target softening, dělostřelecká příprava in Czech. So before you attack a country, you do ideological softening.
Diligence work, yeah.
How do you
diligence, the due diligence. You basically check different,
No. You prepare the country so that they kind of welcome, ideally, the invasion. And so, have you been seeing this in church debates or between Georgia and Russian counterparts, or between the Ukrainian and the Russian counterparts? Has there been a division years or months before the war, sort of a declaration of war, or did this come together with the first shot? Perhaps if you want to start before the translation.
I can be very short, because as I've told you, I'm a civic activist. Even though now I'm starting my PhD becoming historian, it's not my main field yet. But I have to be honest, I think from the outside what I'm seeing is we have way less information actually than we should in these areas. And what I can say is, from outsiders, the Georgian Orthodox Church seems like, they have way better relationship with the Russian Church than they actually do. It's actually quite not that positive, and it's actually down to very few individuals who have relationships.
But was there a theological fight before the war began?
But there is a thing, it's not about theology. I think that's extremely important to actually
So, for example,
understand.
the subjugation of church to state is a big theological question.
But I think when we talk about, because it's the same religion, when we talk about Christian orthodoxy. So, for example, for Georgia and Russia, I think the biggest problem is actually our occupied territories. As you know, 20% of Georgia is occupied, and one of our biggest pains today is actually when in Abkhazia, Georgian Orthodox Church does not have jurisdiction today, and it's actually partly Russian church and partly the world patriarchate, and it's quite a complicated issue. So for Georgian church, this is one of the most painful issues, that they have to find a common grounds with the Russian
But they used to have them, right? Back in the days.
Of course, our patriarch is actually Metropolitan of Abkhazia.
I'm really interested, how did that sever? How did that become a war zone, as we have heard? There are major differences.
How Georgian Orthodox Church sees it, and actually how the world churches sees Georgia today, it's united. So from perspective of even Russian Church recognizes that Georgia is united, including Abkhazia. But so actually on a political level, they always have this as a potential, how to say, merging to say, oh, we can always recognize and take.
So when did your representatives, Georgian and Russian religious representatives, stop to talk?
Well, you know that Georgia doesn't have an embassy in Russia for many years now, since 2008. And I think there's the church in Moscow, the Georgian Orthodox Church. So sometimes it feels actually that even priests sometimes play a role of a diplomat in Georgia-Russian relations. We haven't had an official delegation from Russia for a long time. But there has been, I don't know, there has been, for example, I can give you an example of 2018, when we had a historic visit of religious leaders to Brussels. We had 13 metropolitans of Georgian Orthodox Church, Catholic bishop, both Shia and Sunni leaders. It was extremely important historic visit of Georgian religious leaders' visit to our strategic partner in the US, and I would like to thank Ned again for this amazing opportunity. But after that, there was this cultural visit to Moscow, for example. There was, I don't want to, it was some kind of celebration, 300 years of whatever. And there was a Georgian delegation who went to Moscow. So what I'm trying to say is that Georgian Orthodox Church has been really trying to keep also that momentum of understanding that from the religious perspective, sometimes, yes, again, Moscow has been using religion on political stands and for their political will, and sometimes even for negotiations, and reminding others that they can play a role with religion. But from Georgian patriarch's perspective, and I think because, again, as I mentioned, he has a very specific role also inside the country as well as the outside the country, that it has been playing an extremely important role. Like patriarch's personality and him actually adding to his name, official title, he's also Metropolitan of Abkhazia, which is occupied territory, because also Russia, when they would be calling his name, they would not mention the Abkhazia. So he officially made that as a part of his title.
And that began when?
Quite soon after the 2000, but you know, the war started in the 1990s, right? So after the collapse of Soviet Union, Georgia became one of the first countries where Russia has implemented this strategy of occupy and destabilize, and internal civil war, and using religion and like all of that, and calling people KGBs because they have this special data, and just it's so easy to blackmail today someone when you don't have the data, being like, even on the patriarch actually, there has been this gossips like, oh, you know that he is actually KGB, when they saw that his trust was growing too far and too high. So I think it is extremely important to see the role that Russia has been using church for, including in conflicts, including in political stands, including in diplomatic relations.
Thank you very much. Sir, please. How do you view it? Is it? I mean, if it uses economic warfare, it's also an economic warfare. If it uses tanks, it's a warfare proper. If it uses religious arguments, it's a religious war, if not mainly, partially. What's your take on the role of church, let's say?
Thank you very much. I'm coming from Montenegro, and people usually call us Balkan Ukrainians, not because we are so brave, not because we are so big, because we are the smallest country in the Balkan, but because we have our own Russia. It's Serbia. So we regained our independence from Serbia in 2006, but we never regained Montenegrin Orthodox Church. Before 1918, Montenegro has own Montenegrin Church, recognized in ecumenical patriarchate, but then in 1918, Serbs came in Montenegro and occupied our territory and then formed Yugoslavia. And whole 20th century, Montenegro lives under the Serbia. And you know, in Balkan context, identity is very important. It's something that shapes you. And In 2006, when we regained our independence, we never did nothing to regain our Orthodox Church. Why? Because Serbian Orthodox Church is very strong, very powerful organization. They will never recognize Montenegrin Orthodox Church. And it's really similar like Ukraine case. And Russia has their own ideology called Ruski Mir, or Russian world, and Serbia promote their own ideology called Srpski svet, or Serbian world. And they use Orthodoxy as instrument. So I wrote few theses in my last analysis about influence of Serbian church, and it's very short, but I think it can be very, very useful for you. So the Serbian Orthodox Church is the primary instrument of cultural and identity transformation in Montenegro. It operates according to the patterns and an agenda of hybrid action, with the ultimate goal of the long-term establishment of the Serbian factor in Montenegro, within which religious doctrine serves as a platform for 1. Normalization of the political pan-Serbian narrative, 2. The legitimization of Montenegrin history, language, culture, and statehood. 3. Spiritual colonization through mass performative forms, aggressive and mythologized iconography, and the introduction of the church into public institutions. So, we are speaking about NATO member. And Montenegro looks like Balkan Lebanon also, because beside 41% of Montenegrins, we have there 33% of Serbs, 9% of Bosniaks, 5% of Albanians, 3% of one ethnic group who said we are Muslims, but we are in national question also Muslims. They call themselves Muslims. We have almost 0.5% of Croats, so you have more than 70% of Orthodox, more than 20% of Muslims, and around 5% of Catholics. So can you imagine how that country is divided? And we are maybe next EU member. So can you imagine what can happen in Montenegro if somebody try to start the war there, between Montenegrins and Serbs, between Montenegrins and Albanians, between Montenegrins and Bosniaks, between Serbs and Bosniaks. So you can pick war, and you will have war. So.
Okay, let's ask a question, please, sir.
Is it on?
Yes.
It's on, yeah. Sveinung Nygaard, Norway. I'm a composer traveling in Ukraine. It's a question for His Beatitude. First, thank you for the bells that were ringing during the revolution of dignity, first time since the Mongol invasion. That was a strong sign of Christian leadership. Second question is, when I think of Christianity, I think of a couple of values. How you view individuals, how you view the value of a human life. From my journeys in Ukraine, I've seen this inside Ukraine. Value of human life. I do not see the same thing in Russia. Are we seeing the edge of Christianity between Ukraine and Russia?
Yeah, in other words, isn't the Russian interpretation of Christianity a collapse of Christianity?
Or something qualitatively different?
Yeah. Thank you, Norway.
Так, звісно, що в Україні ми цінуємо по-особливому людське життя.
Yes, in Ukraine we evaluate human life in a very specific way.
Звичайно, ми повинні боротися за свою землю.
It's obviously we must fight for our land.
Ми не бажали цієї війни, але ми до кінця будемо боротися за свою українську державу.
We don't want to have this war, but we will fight for our country for the very end.
Що ми бачимо з боку Російської Федерації?
What we can see from the side of Russian Federation.
Вони не цінують людське життя. Для них людське життя не має ніякої цінності.
For them, human life have no cost. They don't evaluate in any form life of human.
Хоча вони всюди проповідують про те, що вони є охоронцями традиційних цінностей.
Despite the fact that they everywhere proclaim and pretend that they are guardians of their traditional values.
Але насправді ми бачимо зовсім все по-іншому.
But we can see in reality totally opposite.
Особливо, як вони поводяться з нашими полоненими.
For example, how they treat our prisoners of war.
Те, що ми бачимо, це просто жахливі речі.
What we can see, it's a terrible things.
Тому що навіть тварини в природі так не поводяться, як вони жорстоко поводяться з українцями, які попали в полон.
Even animals don't have such cruelty against animals like we can see from side of Russian occupiers how they treat our prisoners of war.
Я багато спілкувався з тими, хто перебував в полоні на початку повномасштабного вторгнення, це в Бучі, і там відбувалися справді жахливі речі.
I have many chances to speak, to communicate with those who was in captivity from very start of full-scale invasion, for example, in Bucha, and I heard terrible things about their experience.
Це засвідчує, що для них людське життя не має жодного значення, для них має тільки значення ідеологія чи відновлення так званої Російської імперії.
And this is a proof that for Russia have no value human life, but what they really evaluate is the restoration of so-called Russian Empire.
Ми дивимося майбутнє, ми обрали наш чіткий майбутній вектор розвитку, як європейський, як ви сказали, під час наших майданів.
We looking forward and we see ourselves on the path of European integration, what you mentioned before during our Maidans, during our revolutions, we support this choice of Ukrainian nation.
Ми хочемо бути невід'ємною частиною європейської спільноти.
We would like to be indivisible part of European community.
Де панують справжні цінності, справедливість і правда.
Where is really exists real values and the truth.
But so how can your Russian counterpart allow a breaching of a basic Christian commandment and allow silently such dehumanization not only of human beings but brothers in faith? How could they remain a Christian church?
Ми бачимо, що відбувається в реальності. Так,
We
і ми, і вони християни.
Yes, we can see what is reality. We, Ukrainians and Russians, are Christians.
Але Господь сказав про те, що нас будуть бачити, що ми є християни, якщо серед нас пануватиме любов.
But the God's words is that everybody will recognize you as a Christians throughout your love and Christian deeds.
So would you still call them Christians?
І ми бачимо, що ці...
Чи можемо ми їх далі назвати християнами?
Тоді виходить, якщо вони не дотримуються принципів і заповідей, і закону євангельського, який базується на любові, то тоді, звісно, що ми не можемо називати таких людей християнами.
It's true that if they don't follow and they don't realize in their life the principles of Christianity, it's not possible to call them true Christians.
І що ми бачимо згідно соціології останніх років?
What we can see, what we can find from the sociology of recent years.
В Україні є дуже високий рівень релігійності серед населення.
In Ukraine, in fact, we have a very high level of religious identity, self-identification.
А в Росії за останні роки цей показник впав до декількох відсотків.
But in Russia, this level of self-identity, the self-identification as religious persons decreased dramatically to the level of few percents.
Бо якщо, наприклад, в Україні на останні свята, там пасхальні свята, прийшло декілька мільйонів людей, то в цілій Росії це тільки мільйон з чимось.
For example, in Ukraine, some millions of followers of believers came to the Easter services on Easter celebration because it's a major festivity for Orthodox Christians. But in Russia, which bigger 3 times than Ukraine, only 1 million was attended this Easter service.
And there is no global Orthodox authority that could declare the Russian interpretation as non-compliant with Christianity. I know this is possible in other churches, but I know that also Orthodoxy is quite famous for its decentralization. But what would happen if your church would declare Russian Orthodox no longer Christians?
Ми, як Православна Церква України, звернулися з відповідним рішенням нашого архієрейського собору і помісного собору до Вселенського патріарха Варфоломія, який є першим у православному світі.
In Orthodox world, we have a person and institution, ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople, now is Patriarch Bartholomew, who have first dignity among all other Orthodox hierarchs, and our Bishops' Council decided to send a letter with appeal to All Holiness Patriarch Bartholomew in this question.
Для того, щоб він почав процес засудження цієї ідеології руського міра.
We ask him to start the official process of the trial to judge this ideology of руський мір.
Тому що ця ідеологія не має християнського підґрунтя.
Because really this ideology have no ground in Christianity.
І тому ми очікуємо рішення від Вселенського патріархату. Зараз ми бачимо з боку Олександрійського патріархату також є підтримка в цьому питанні, і тому потрібен час для того, щоб питання...
It's take a time to resolve this question, but we can see the support from Ecumenical Patriarchate, Patriarchate of Alexandria, and some other churches.
Thank you for doing that, because otherwise it sheds a weird light to the rest of Christianity if it's so freely interpreted for genocide and other heinous deeds with or under the name of a formerly Christian nation. Thank you. Do you want to add something, maybe an experience from your country? Otherwise, I would like to give word to
5 minutes left, and let's get a question.
To MP from Ukraine.
Thank you. I have a comment and a question. So, what we've just heard really tells us how Russia is weaponizing church. And I just want to share two facts that in 2020 and 2021, just 2 years, 1 year before the war, Russian church was building the biggest number of the churches in Ukraine near the military bases. Thanks God, now Russian church is forbidden in Ukraine. We made such a decision in the parliament, and our president made such a decision. But I really want to ask you here from your countries, what Russian church is doing in your countries. I know that in Sweden, for instance, Russian church was building a church next to the military base, even using the state money of Sweden because it was subsidized. So that's very important. And I want also to say just another fact that about the Georgian church, just for you to understand that Georgian church unfortunately hasn't recognized the autonomy of Ukrainian church yet. Just for you to understand where Georgian church is now. I think the human face of Ukrainian church brings trust to Ukrainian society because Ukrainian church is growing with all the traumas and helping Ukrainian society. And I think it shall be happening the same way in other countries. My question is, what is the future of the Russian church when it will collapse?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. What is the what is the future of Russian non-church or the true faith of the believers? What would happen to a Russian Christian if they actually stood up with you and said that what Putin is doing is heinous? And I'm actually quite surprised that 2,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ, we still don't have some provision that bans militarization of religion, because this should be fairly easy to do. Last question, sir, please, can you keep it brief? We only have 3.5 minutes.
Sure, thank you. It's actually very related to the last comment. My name is Dylan Miles Primakov. I'm with the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States. I've had the opportunity to meet with a few dissident Russian priests.
A question.
Yes. Priests who have been ejected from their positions in the Russian church for preaching values of love and peace in opposition to the state-controlled structures of the church. My question is, do you see opportunities for collaboration with these Russian priests in current conditions or in the future?
Okay, thank you very much. We only have 3 minutes, and I was told that I will be punished if we don't end exactly on time. So I also beg you for my health's sake. Would you like to answer these questions, perhaps really briefly, with something sharp and really clever?
I wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I try to be very short. We have problem here. After communism, we have ideological vacuum in the Balkans, in Eastern countries. So Orthodoxy fulfilled that. And Russia instrumentalized Orthodoxy as an instrument of power. Everything what Russia did in Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Serbia did in the Balkans.
So shouldn't there be a provision that bans weaponization of religions? I mean, that's fairly easy to do objectively.
I will tell you something. I see here my friend Agron from Kosovo, and he can explain better than anyone here, except his beatitude, what Serbian priests did in 1999 when Serbia tried to occupy Kosovo. They promote war crimes. They said kill Albanians. So they did the same in the Bosnia 4 years before that. So a few days before genocide in Srebrenica, Patriarch of Serbian Orthodox Church, he celebrated tanks and guns. So we are speaking about war criminals in Serbian and Russian church. And it is the question.
And the church should have a special provision for that in a special space.
Yes, they said we're doing this for God. I'm finished.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Closing remarks. Would you like to go first, or you? You have to share a minute. Thank you very much.
Росія розпадеться.
Russia will be dissolved.
І російська церква стане однією із церков.
And Russian church from imperial church become one among other ordinary churches.
Бо втратить підтримку російської держави.
Because this church will lose support of Russian state.
Я переконаний, що та церква після розпаду визнає буття незалежної української автокефальної церкви.
And I believe that after the dissolution of Russian Federation, Russian Neo-Empire, that church which will be on that time will recognize the dependency of Ukrainian church.
Це незворотній процес.
It's unreversible process.
І Господь такі створить умови, що це відбудеться.
And God will create such environment and helps to fulfill this, to realize.
Only thing I can add is Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
Thank you very much. Thank you.